Hello, Core 180. Welcome to week 8. We are on our second week of Othello. The big thing this week is to read Acts 2 and 3. Everything we're doing is going around that. As you can see, I'm in my new house. Looks a lot like the old house, minus anything on the walls yet. So hopefully next week that gets done. So this week, Acts 2 and 3, I'm using this version once again, the No Fear Othello. You can find a version of No Fear, I believe, online as well. And there are other online or print versions that would work just as well. So what you're going to do, nothing too major this week. You're going to read Act 2. I've got a short little video that is Act 2, Scene 1, reimagined, kind of cartoonish. It's silly, but it gets you the idea of how sexist Iago is. Sometimes Iago's sexism doesn't come across in the old language because we're not used to it. So if you watch that, you really get the idea of what a jerk he is. Some people have used the term frenemies to talk about Othello and the fact that Iago is so much acting as Othello's friend and in his interest, but we know the whole time he's plotting and scheming against him. In Acts 2 and 3, the action is going to ramp up a little bit. Othello arrives in, where are they? Cyprus. And so then we're going to have some more interaction with our characters. We're going to get some intrigue. There's going to be some mystery. There's going to be a handkerchief that gets stolen and copied, which is going to be very important. As you know, back in the pre-internet times, having an item is sometimes really important to proving something or disproving something. And that handkerchief becomes very important in the play. We come across a character named Bianca, who I don't think we've met before. Bianca is what they call a courtesan, which is a really nice way of saying like a prostitute. She is going to figure in. She's pretty minor, but she does do some actions that really influence the events of the play. We're going to see Othello succumbing more and more and more to his doubt, more and more to his jealousy. If you watch the 1995 version, I think you'll see it this week or next week, where he has a seizure, and it's kind of a strange thing on screen, because in the play it's just, oh, and then my master had a seizure, he had an epileptic fit. But to see it on screen is a little different. I think that's at the very end of Act 3, beginning of Act 4, so we may or may not get there this week. So read Act 2 and 3. Spend your time going through it. You might want to read it a couple times. You might want to read a couple different versions. Once again, my point is not that you can pick up a Shakespearean book and read it from cover to cover immediately the first time, but instead that you understand what's going on and what the storyline is. After you read Act 2, you'll want to do all the journaling stuff that goes with Act 2 from your journal, which is under the General Othello resources. That's a little funny pun, right? General Othello. Do all the stuff that goes with Act 2, anything that you can. Keep up with that journal. Keep that saved on your computer. Keep updating that. Answer the questions for Act 2 and read Act 3. Do the same thing, journal questions. You'll upload the questions this week for Acts 2 and 3, just like you did for Act 1 last week. But the journal you hang on to until the end. So those are two separate things. There is a quiz for Acts 2 and 3. I'd wait till I get through almost everything else before I take the quiz. The more time you have to let the information sit, digest, go over it, the better you're going to do on that quiz. I think the way the quiz is set up, now that I figured out military time, thanks Kyla, which I had issues with last week, it's set up that you can take 2 chances. It'll take your best score, and I think you have 30 minutes for each chance. So kind of keep that in mind. Do the quiz. The one thing you're going to do that's maybe a little strange this week, you need to find an ebook in Dort's library. It's called Othello. Harold Bloom is a big Othello guy. He's a big Shakespeare guy. He writes a lot about Shakespeare and literature. So this is his version of Othello. There's actually the full text of the play is within this book. You don't need to worry about that. If you want to use it, you sure could. I'd like you to read the introduction to the book. Introduction's misleading because it's actually pretty lengthy. But spend some time. Read through that introduction. The information on how to find that particular book is on your learning guide, and it's on Courses at Dort. And once you read through that, I want you to just make a document where you list, doesn't have to be paragraphs, list 10 things you know about the play now, because that introduction is mostly background to Othello. So list 10 things you've learned from that introduction, and you'll upload that. Trying to think if there's anything else strange that you're doing. You have the link to the 1995 version, which I recommend doing. I think it's helpful to see it. If there's a scene you're particularly interested in, if you YouTube it, you can find tons and tons of versions of people either doing modern adaptations, or you can see classic adaptations of it. So feel free to poke around and look for stuff too if you're interested in it. That is the big part this week. If you have not turned in your poetry paper yet, that should be on your agenda. I'm going to go through and finish those up tonight, tomorrow. So by today's Monday, by Tuesday afternoon, evening, ideally your grades should be all updated. Everything from the end of week 7 till end of this week that we're finishing up today. So if you haven't done that, make sure you get those in. If you have not done your second personal response, I know some of you have sent those to me. That's just an email, and the information on that is under the at the very top of Courses at Door under Important Documents or Course Documents. If you haven't done that, make sure you send that on my way. I will be getting back to you. If you have sent me one already, I'll get to those here in the next 24 hours. I think that's just about everything. There's a discussion board. Some ideas. You don't have to stick with the ideas that I posted to discuss, but if you're stuck, that might be a great place to begin. And once again, if you have any questions, you have any concerns, let me know. I'm pretty much available now that my move is done and all my trips are done. I have VBS next week, which is always exciting. So let me know if there's any problems. We have this week, which is Acts 2 and 3. Next week, Acts 4 and 5. And then we just have, after that, we have 3 weeks of True Grit. So if you haven't thought about where you're going to get a copy of True Grit by Charles Portis, you might start thinking about that a little bit. Most libraries would have it, and you'd have enough time to probably interlibrary loan it if you needed to as well, or any bookstore should have it. So keep that in mind. That'll be 3 weeks from now, and then we will be done with the semester in another couple weeks. You can look at the timeline for when grades are due and things like that. Once our semester ends or our session ends, I think it will end, and I think I have to turn in the grades within a couple of days. So I think we end on maybe Monday or so, and then I have to turn in grades like Tuesday or Wednesday. So once we're done, there will not be a lot of turnaround time. If stuff is out there, it will need to be in because we won't have a lot of time there. Okay, well, I hope you are enjoying or at least tolerating Othello. I know it's not everyone's cup of tea, but I happen to really like it. So that's why you have to read it. And hopefully it's not too depressing. Anyway, we will see you again next week. Have a good week filled with Othello.